Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of G-Rated, where we review our favorite movies and TV shows. I am joined today by Derek. It's been a while since we've had you on a show.
I know, and, it's good to be back.
Yeah, we are right in our Marvel Star Wars wheelhouse again. We're back. And unfortunately, it might be one of my least favorite MCU projects that we've had to talk about.
Yeah.
We're doing Secret Invasion today. Season 1 just wrapped up yesterday on Wednesday. Another 6-episode series. And Derek, I got to tell you, I'm not very high on this one.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, I've followed along all of the MCU projects pretty diligently because at this point, it feels like there's just so many disparate threads. And this is the first time that I felt like watching a Marvel show and keeping up kind of felt like a chore to me. But I'm curious, what were your overall thoughts on the show?
I think that I enjoyed it for the most part because I anticipated something coming, right? And I knew what they were doing. Essentially, I think that there are comic book arcs that are important because they're trying to set up other things that they're doing. But the flip side to it is that they are only good in comic book form, right? I had this discussion with my daughter the other day because this is a side tangent, but when I was a kid, I didn't like comics that had talking animals in them. Okay. Like Rocket and Groot. And I was not with any of that kind of stuff because as a kid, I felt like that made comic books like totally silly. Yeah. Right. Like as a kid, I still wanted there to be a thread of reality to it. Right. And like a show like this is one of those shows that is very reality based. It's very like procedural, almost like Civil War was, where it's like almost like I can't say this show isn't meant for you and I. This is totally geared towards our age range and the things that we like. I just think that they missed the mark on this in a lot of ways. I do think that it's hard to make a scroll show about body snatchers or people that essentially steal identities exciting because we've seen that type of story so many times in so many other forms. But I mean, I felt like they definitely could have done more with this. If I'm being honest, the best metaphor for this is the opening, right? Yeah. The opening that so many people, it's become kind of a big story with this, obviously with the writer's strike and at the actor's strike and everything that's going on. A big part of what they're against is AI. And Marvel deliberately used an AI opening for this. It wasn't because they were trying to save money, because they went to the same company that did the excellent openings for like Loki and WandaVision. But they deliberately wanted an AI style opening because they thought it would go well with the show. Yeah. It was one of those cases where it was like, read the room, Marvel. Not only are you one of the biggest companies right now that can afford to have animators and stuff do a beautiful opening, but AI is very controversial right now when it comes to movies and television shows. And that's the direction that you go. You know, I mean, it's a far cry from WandaVision essentially being like this celebration of television and you know, that being the first Marvel show and such on the MCU and on Disney Plus. But this like was the opposite of that when it came to understanding what's going on in society and how people would, I think, react to that kind of opening. Right.
It was very tone deaf in terms of doing that. And, you know, it's kind of sad because you were talking about this series aiming to be a more grounded series. And I think a lot of people were intrigued by the idea of kind of this espionage spy thriller, the paranoia of not knowing who's a Skrull, who's a human. And it felt like they never really fully leaned into that. They never created what they were setting out to do. There was never enough intrigue or mystery or suspense that they created in this show. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why, but let's switch gears and talk about things that we liked about it, because I think there were some good concepts at work here. Like we talked about, the whole concept of a spy thriller, something a little bit different from what Marvel has done recently, kind of throwing it in the same lot with Winter Soldier, projects like that. I think that was a cool concept. I think Samuel L. Jackson is still Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes, absolutely. Very much so. And I mean, he's always going to be cool. He's always going to be a badass. Don Cheadle was also excellent in this. And the supporting cast was incredible, right? Yes. Like I adore Sonya as a character, and the person that plays her is just incredible.
Olivia Colman. She's great.
She absolutely knocked it out of the park in that role. And it's a character that I want to see more of. So when I know a lot of this stuff is a crossover, and especially the way that it ended in the finale with her and Gaia having that conversation, like that's stuff that makes me excited for what is going to come from this, right? I also very much talking about actors, the actor that played Gravik was incredible.
Kingsley Ben-Adir.
Yeah, man, talk about stealing the show. That man was amazing and absolutely a highlight of this. So like the supporting cast is fantastic. I liked what they had going on, but it almost felt like, I don't know, did they not have enough time to tell the story at time? Because like it was so short that like I felt like, you know, like you said, the who's who thing kind of got rushed, and we knew, like, for instance, we knew that Don Cheadle was not Rhodey. You know, we knew that he was a Skrull pretty early on. I felt like there were things like that they could have kept to the end. There was a moment in the finale where I wondered if Sonya was a Skrull, and that was kind of an intriguing moment, but like there wasn't enough of those. And I really did like the idea of that. They killed a lot of people. They killed a lot of significant characters. And like, honestly, I was kind of with that. I liked the idea that they were just going for it instead of tiptoeing around, you know, that kind of thing. So like, I like the bravado, but I don't feel like the story ended up going anywhere significantly enough for those characters to have been killed for this, right? Like, which brings me back to the idea that I kind of waited the entire series for something more significant to happen. And they did a good job of building that. Like, I felt that anticipation. But when we got, you know, to the series finale, I felt like it was pretty flat.
Yeah. I like, to your point, like, we'll talk about the 6-episode format. We'll talk about the finale for sure. I liked the idea of Fury, kind of the central premise that, like, Fury had failed these refugee Skrulls, and kind of the point it's mirroring as far as our own government in that regard. I think that's an interesting concept. But it does feel like you said, there's not enough time to flesh out a story, even if they're hour-long episodes in 6 episodes. Like, Disney has to look itself in the mirror and realize we're not HBO. We're not crafting like these masterful 6-episode miniseries. We're not capable of doing that. We need longer time to flesh out some of these characters, some of these episodes, a lot of whom we're introducing for the first time. Like Gravik's character was great and played really well. The monologue in the finale that he had, his kind of villainous monologue, as far as his motivations and the betrayal he felt by Fury, was all fascinating. But a lot of his actions in terms of like, we're just going to bomb New Skrullos, which is where a lot of my people are, and, you know, murdering any of his lieutenants that questioned him was kind of like, okay, we're taking it a bridge too far. And it felt like some of those motivations would have been great to portray earlier in the series. It just feels like Marvel, like WandaVision is still one of probably the top 2 shows that Marvel has done on Disney Plus, and that had 9 episodes. Like, it had more time to flesh things out and build mystery, build suspense, all of that stuff. This just felt like we need to do something with the Secret Invasion story, the beloved story from the comics. We're just gonna kind of shove it into this series, and like the thing is, like, there were opportunities to intrigue, like the whole thing at the very end with the president's kind of hateful speech of xenophobia that incites people to start murdering people like Skrulls and people they think are Skrulls. Like, that chaos and that paranoia, that should have been like a midpoint of the series, not the very end. They could have done some really interesting stuff with that afterward.
That's a great point. And then some of their big plot moments I just didn't really get. Like, I do feel like part of this is the fact that they were trying to shove storylines that involve other characters, right? Like, because if I'm not mistaken, this is old comic book knowledge for me, but I think the Super Skrull became the Super Skrull based on stealing the Fantastic Four's DNA,
I think,
and
so,
not all of the Avengers.
That was a little
right, like, and that, and even the idea, the concept that their end game there was that they were going to give him all of the powers, but they're also going to give him the Gaia so that she can battle him and defeat him.
Right.
Felt like a very risky proposition, right?
Yes.
Like, you were still giving him all of the powers, right? And they just had this little mixed cocktail thing. Like, there were a lot of things there that I thought that they could have done better. Like, I mean,
super DNA formula. That's like all of them.
Right. I like the idea that there was, you know, whatever the, you know, like a set of the DNA that they collected, but like, man, make it a bunch of vials or something. Like, I mean, there's just there's little things like that when it happened, it's not like it was a like, oh, it stopped me from enjoying it in the moment, but it's just those details that makes you go, oh God. Like I've been watching movies with my daughter in cinematic order, or in what was it? Like chronological order, right? Like not the order they came out. And it's actually fairly cool because I feel like they build the Avengers better in chronological order than the original order. But I realized, like, in watching Iron Man, how much work they put into it. And I mean, after watching that at the same time, Iron Man and Iron Man 2 at the same time as watching this show, I was kind of like, yeah, I can see where Marvel is going wrong with these shows, because they're not putting the same amount of work into it. And they're not like, I mean, Iron Man's almost 20 or 15 years old now, I think. And I mean, that should show some age, and it absolutely does not at this point, which shows how much work they put into it. You know, some of those things that it just, that feels like that was what was missing out of these shows.
It feels like they're just throwing money at things now and not actually crafting good stories. Everything is a connective bridge to the next project. But a lot of the next projects don't deliver. They're too busy worrying about the groundwork, because we have so many different things going on. Like, just going back to Falcon and Winter Soldier, which feels like forever ago, there's the whole character with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who she's recruiting these people, and that has just been left on the back burner for like multiple years now.
It's supposed to be a team of all the like anti-heroes, right?
And it's like, are these ever going to converge again in a meaningful way? Because it felt like Avengers Endgame was the peak of that convergence, and now we just have all these separate stories. And I know they're trying to build up to Kang and whatnot, but that's in doubt now because of Major's whole situation and the things that the horrific things he's been accused of. So it's just kind of like, I'm starting to feel like, and I never felt this way, even watching like the new Ant-Man or Black Panther that some people didn't like it feels like we are, like, Marvel is heading downhill, and I don't know what it's going to take to get them out of this funk other than telling meaningful stories, because it felt like in this series, they played the same trick multiple times. Like, every death felt unearned or repetitive, or in retro,
it's like just for shock value at the end of the episode. Almost,
every episode ended with like a death or the review, and then it was immediately diffused the next episode. Like the first premiere ends with Maria Hill's death, which felt unearned because, you know, she's been in multiple projects, but we never really got to know anything about her. They underserved her character. One of the episodes ended with the kind of reveal that Nick Fury, A, has a wife, and B, she's a Skrull. And then it was immediately diffused the tension, like, oh, he knows that his wife is a Skrull. And then there's Gaia's death, which didn't last. She's immediately back to life the next episode, and you knew that was coming. And then like every death, and then Talos's death felt underserved because they didn't spend any time after the fact dwelling on it. Like, Nick Fury just left him on the side of the
battlefield and gotta save the president.
Never revisited that. There was the one scene with Gaia mourning her father with Nick Fury's wife and having the burial or whatever. But there was nothing from Talos and Fury's relationship that translated into the finale. Like, even the monologue that Samuel L. Jackson gives about his regret and how he failed the Skrulls doesn't ring true because it was Gaia the whole time. So it's like,
it was just a convoluted fake speech that she just made up, you know, to make him feel better in the moment. You know, like, I'm with you. And also, I don't know, there's just a lot of stuff that ended up being messier than it should have in this entire show, right? And I think that's a big problem with it, is like especially with the deaths, they didn't really care that much about again, like focusing on the gravity of it. They also had, you know, at the end of the finale, all the people that were captured by the Skrulls get released, right? And again, it's just small pet peeves, but like, okay, so Don Cheadle has been there long enough that he can't walk, but everybody else is okay. These people have been standing upright inside of a cocoon essentially for God knows how long, and they're just all like, they're just walking out on their own power. Like, I want
to ask you about that, because the internet is up in arms about kind of retconning Don Cheadle or Rhodey as a Skrull. And a lot of people are inferring that because he couldn't walk, that since Civil War he's been a Skrull when he, you know, got his back and his legs all fucked up. I don't know that necessarily supports that conclusion. But it does, like, people are posting scenes on Twitter angry that they're like, so this wasn't Rhodey the whole time, this was a scroll. And like a lot, like Iron Man's death, like in Endgame, is very different if that's a scroll and not his best friend for years that's like closing his eyes for the last time. Like that robs that moment of that significance, if that's the case. I don't think we know definitively.
No, I don't think
and
so.
I hope that's not the case.
No, and I don't think it is, but we are putting a lot in there. And I mean, at any point, they can make that the case, right? Like, they really can. But they could go as far back as Terrence Howard. I mean, like, if they wanted to.
That's a deep cut right
I mean,
there.
seriously, like, I didn't even realize the little joke in Iron Man 2 they made where when he walks out, he's like, it's you, and he's like, yep, just don't even say anything, just let's forget it. And like, I was like, oh, that's a good joke now that I realize what they were saying there. But yeah, no, I mean, Don Cheadle was excellent in this, and I thought he did a good job of playing that dual role. But I don't know if we've seen that particular side out of Rhodey before, where he was like so aggressively, that way that he was in this show. So I mean, I think that kind of shows
someone pointed to the joke in Endgame where he makes the joke about like strangling baby Thanos, like when they're talking about going back in time.
Oh yeah.
But those are minor things, and they still work for the character of Rhodey. But I did want to ask you about the finale, because you mentioned it fell flat. I felt like it was okay, but for anyone who watched She-Hulk, it did the exact thing that She-Hulk made fun of Marvel for doing, in terms of the finale devolving into this CGI based fight with zero stakes. And it kind of felt like that. Like, this was supposed to be the grounded Marvel project. And yes, it did add some excitement. There were some cool concepts there in terms of, the arms changing into different superheroes or the different powers. But they also kind of like nerfed a lot of their characters, which, for those who don't know what that means, it's like arbitrarily weakening them in order to even the stakes a little bit. Like, Gaia's now the most powerful being in the MCU.
By far.
And she's been in 6 episodes of the show and is not like a character really in the comics that I'm aware of in terms of having all of these powers.
Well, she was a Skrull, but yeah, you're right. Like, she was there was this whole thing where her and another Skrull she married, or I think she married a Kree, and they become like Tony Stark and Pepper Potts for a while and stuff like that. But in regards to that, I do think that was a bit of a fan service, because I will say that gave me a little bit of a geek out moment. Like, that's kind of an iconic thing for Skrulls, where like the Super Skrull has appeared a lot of times.
Right.
And when he's on a cover, or like the comic book card I used to have, the collectible cards, like, that's what he looked like. It was always the Skrull face, and he'd have like Mr. Fantastic's left arm, and he'd have the Thing's right arm, and he'd be flying with the Human Torch's body, and then his midsection would be invisible. So it was like,
there is a basis for it.
There is absolutely a basis for that particular visual, especially the Super Skrull, right? Like, there is only one in the comic book world, versus it being like a process. I mean, I'm sure at some point they were trying to turn all of them into it, but I mean, like you said, Gaia now is the most powerful being. And I mean, even that, right? Like, if it would have just been the Super Skrull, for me personally, it would have been much different. But considering they made 2 of them, that kind of watered it down a bit, made that moment a little bit less exciting. And like, I don't know, like, all of a sudden you could kill him. Like, they blew his head off and it went back together. Like, how did
the Captain Marvel blast do that? Especially to another Super Skrull. There were just a lot of little things like that I had a problem with. Like, just the whole concept of Nick Fury having a wife who still identifies herself as his wife after he just left for years at a time, and was in outer space, and his excuses were not very good if you're in a married relationship.
I had work to do.
The blip changed me. Okay, cool. It changed fucking everything. You're just gonna fuck off to space.
People
for years
literally
at a time?
disappeared for years, and then we have to just act like they didn't when they come back.
Just going back to the thing, a lot of these men in the MCU just go to therapy, and you probably wouldn't be where you are.
They're gaslighters in the
MCU. I don't know. It's just disappointing that the closest that this got to feeling like a paranoia thriller was the intro music, and it was ruined by the fact that it was AI artwork. So,
well, and there's another thing that in the comic books, Nick Fury has like a fleet of decoys. They call them like life model decoys, LMDs, and if that is a popular concept. Like, it's kind of it's an out for every time they wanted to kill Nick Fury. It was always a clone. It's always a robot, right? But it still would have been a cool thing there at the end to find out, like, if you wanted to talk about paranoia or whatever, that Nick Fury that came down and did all of this was a robot, and there was like a clone, and the real Nick Fury wasn't even here on Earth or whatever that whole time. Like, there's things like that. But then it made me think about the show. I was like, that would kind of like you said, it would ruin a lot of the personal moments that Nick Fury had while doing stuff. But I felt like this show needed more. Even at the end, I felt like what they gave you wasn't enough to make me excited even about the next thing that they're trying to lead to.
The ending was nonsensical to me because this man basically, like, his intentions were obviously good, but the whole thing with the president, he basically is inciting a species war now here on Earth. It's open hunting on the Skrulls. And yes, I get he's going to these peace talks with the Kree or whatever to find them a home. But is he operating in an official capacity again? Is he totally a lone wolf now? Like, the phone call with the president did not make that clear at the very end. And is he just going back up to space after he left the world in disarray again? What are we doing here?
Figure it out. I got to go up to the spaceship. No, and also, like, it very much feels like, and again, like, part of the problem with these shows is it leaves you asking questions, and not the good kind of questions, not the kind of cliffhangers where you're like, ooh, I can't wait to see what happens next. It's more like, well, what are they doing? Right.
Like, where are they going with this?
Right. Like, if this incites this particular president character to start enacting all sorts of craziness against superheroes and all sorts of super beings because of the Skrull attack, then at least this was the kickoff point for that. And maybe it leads to, like, the Mutant Registration Act when the X-Men get involved in things. So I'm hopeful because I can see at least there's a path for them to do more with that particular thing. Like you said, that should have been more of a midpoint in the season versus it being the final episode.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate because I used to look forward to every new MCU project as what's coming next, and now it's feeling tedious. Like, when are they going to get somewhere interesting?
I do love this. Moon Knight is trending today, and the reason why is because now people appreciate Moon Knight, but they didn't at the time.
Good.
Well, they didn't at the time.
That. I will stand that.
Me too. I mean, I thought it was really, really good, and I thought the fact that they left so much on the table to tell you about that character after the first season made it even more intriguing. Even though they didn't go there, it's like, they didn't have to give you everything because they do intend to make more of this, and they want that to be a fun part of it. But this show doesn't feel like that at all. And it's the same. Also, like, I wasn't huge on Miss Marvel, but I also felt like this is more for the 12-year-old girl that's sitting next to me watching it more than it is for me.
Right.
So even though I'm not, like, super high on it, I can still enjoy it. And I know it's for kind of a different audience.
Right.
This was for us.
And they dropped it down. And, like, if you look at the worst rated Marvel shows on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, they're Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, and this. Those are the last three shows that Marvel has done. Yeah. They're not heading in the right direction. And I actually liked Miss Marvel. She-Hulk, I did not like at all.
She-Hulk was very combative. I felt like
it got better the last 3 or 4 episodes. Everything leading up to that, when
I mean combative, I felt like that was when things started to change between Marvel and the fans, where they started openly doing things to, like, attack a particular segment of their fans that, to be fair, deserve to be attacked. But at the same time, what an odd choice to take when you're producing a show that you want as many people to watch, right? So, like, Marvel really did start kind of a war with a certain section of people, especially with that show. And again, I don't know if that's the best, like, idea when you're running an entertainment company, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean, and even more than that, just, like, make good content again, because the last 2 out of the last 3 shows I just have not been high on. But if you had to give this, I guess this is the series finale, there's not going to be a second season. What would you give this series out of 10 for your final score?
Man, I feel like this is very low, but I'm being honest, and I feel like it's a 5. Like, if other shows, I'm very high on WandaVision, for instance, and if that's close to, like, being the best show, 9 out of 10, I can't say it was perfect, but I can't give this show a rating anywhere close to that.
Okay, that's fair. I'm going to go with a 5.5. I feel like there were good concepts here. I feel like the cast carried a lot in this show because
Gravik was incredible. I really can't say that. Like, I'm almost mad they killed him off because I would have liked to see him as a villain in future Marvel projects. Yeah, maybe we do. I mean, who knows?
He's blowing up right now. Like, he was in the new Barbie movie. He's been in a lot of stuff. Peaky Blinders. But yeah, I got to go 5.5 on this one. I just feel like they missed the mark. They missed a lot of potential with this. Yeah. And again, stop with the 6-episode TV shows. Like, we need more time to flesh things out. If you're not going to put the thought and attention into these shows, don't do them because I got to be honest, I'm already dreading what Echo is going to be. I'm already concerned about
that one I have zero interest in. And honestly, like really what it comes down to is we know you have our money. So if you are going to do it, stop being so blatant about taking our money and being like, we don't care. We don't have to do a whole season. You guys already paid us for this subscription. But like make those 6 episodes quality.
Yeah.
Like this should have been like a Marvel film because of the length of it broken up into 6 episodes, right? I mean, we're talking about essentially a 3-hour Marvel movie at 30 to 35 minutes, right? Like 3 hours, 30 minutes total for the runtime for the entire series. So, you know, be better if it's going to be this short. Like you said, the HBO content that's shorter is still at least delivers.
Loki's the only one that I can say is a 6-episode format and absolutely nailed it. Like even Moon Knight I thought was good, but I thought it could have been better and better served if it was longer than just the 6 episodes.
This show could have been better if they let them have more actors. Like it's like they were like, hey, we want to do a thing. They're like, you can have Don Cheadle.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. Like really, that's it. And they're like, no, everybody else is busy. It's like I don't know, like a Carol Danvers appearance, even in a flashback or something like that would have been cool. Some more stuff from the MCU, considering it was Nick Fury, just would have, I think, helped aid the show.
And even as I understand, if you don't want to do that as a grounded show, but that grounded show has to be really good. It has to be a good spy thriller, and they can't stop getting in their own way and turning it into another comic book story, and that's hurting the product at the end. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of G-Rated. You can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourget. You can follow Derek on Twitter at Cap_caveman.
Am I the real Derek?
Is he? Until next time, keep it G-Rated.